Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is September 8, 2020. And this is a video, I guess you could say the third in my election series. So 2 days ago, I did a video called Voting Socialist in 2020, and that was a rundown of the Green Party and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which also runs as the Peace and Freedom Party in California. And comparison of their platforms. Conclusion, I think they're very similar platforms. I think that although there are some differences in the party ideology, that socialists could participate in and vote for either party. And in fact, my recommendation was to vote Green because they're on the ballot in more states and it's more likely to get an impressive result if we all vote for them. Then yesterday, I did a video about the Libertarian Party. Who are hyper-capitalist, crypto-fascist freaks, should not be supported. They're the class enemy of the working class. Socialists should not work with them under any circumstances. And honestly, I feel that video came out really well. I am staunchly anti-libertarian, and I feel like that is a good introduction to anyone on why progressives or socialists and libertarians cannot work together. You hear this a lot from more recent converts, ex-Democrats, ex-Bernie-crats, etc., who are like, we just need to unite the third parties. It's really not that simple. Some of the third parties, such as the Libertarian and Constitution parties, work for capital. They're not going to work for you. So if you know anybody who needs to listen to that video, please check it out. And it's sort of a good review of Marxism 101. So, might just be enjoyable for that reason. But anyway, that's sort of a rundown of third party. I don't really like that term, but like non-duopoly politics in the country. I don't like the term because third party, first of all, there's more than one of them. And second of all, third party has the connotation of somebody who is not directly involved in something. And I don't know, it's just, I think it's a subtle way that helps to perpetuate the notion that the Democrats and Republicans own the U.S. government. So I don't like the term third party. I use it because people understand it, but I use it with the qualification and, that explanation. So with that rundown complete, let's talk about the Democrats and Republicans because they are in power, have been in power for over 100 years, and our country sucks. How about that? We're in a terrible situation in 2020. We're 40 years into neoliberalism, which is the attempt to move from fettered capitalism with social welfare programs, i.e. welfare capitalism or social democracy, back to unregulated, privatized, defunded, classical liberalism or free market laissez-faire capitalism, which is what, again, libertarians are all about. But so the Democrats and Republicans are pretty much both in on that agenda. I liken it to good cop, bad cop. The Republicans are the bad cop. They are more brutal. They are more open about how much they want to bust you. They'll smack you around a little bit. The good cop, the Democrats come in and they're like, oh, they're still there to bust you, but they're like, can I get you some water? Can I get you a donut? Like, we just want to make this easy. I mean, we understand, you had to go rob that guy. You know what I mean? But they're both there to do the exact same thing. And, one of the things that they are there to do right now is not pass COVID relief, apparently, because they have not been passing COVID relief. I haven't done a video on COVID in a while. The whole coronavirus crisis has been awful for working people. Going into the coronavirus pandemic in March is when news of it formally broke, even though it started a few months earlier. Actually, it didn't even start in 2020. It started in 2019. That's why it's called COVID-19, coronavirus ID 19. Anyway, before we went into that, we were already in a situation where 2/3 of the U.S. working class were living paycheck to paycheck and could not afford a financial emergency of $500 to $1,000. So that's the situation that we were in going into the COVID pandemic. And then everybody's told they have to stay at home and not work. and the U.S. government writes them a $1,200 check and says, here, that should last you 10 weeks. I shit you not. That's what Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, said, was that should be. So $120 a week, they said, would be sufficient. Now, there were supplementary programs. They passed something called the CARES Act, an acronym CARES, that gave additional funding to businesses. I mean, a lot of it was like corporate bailout, similar to 2008. And there was some more direct assistance to individuals through the unemployment system. I don't think that that's a good way to go. They should have just given people checks without making people necessarily file unemployment. But this is the United States, and it's all about the deserving poor versus the undeserving poor. And so you have to claim hardship. Not just the fact that we live in a collapsing economic system, because the ruling class doesn't want to admit that. Capitalism is falling apart. You have to actually show hardship, even though it's painfully obvious that there's hardship everywhere. So they make you file for unemployment, and then they'll give you 172, I think it is, minimum a week. And in some cases, you could get a little more, I think up to 200, not a lot more a week. These benefits were covering people who weren't normally covered under the U.S.'s very stingy unemployment system. You can only qualify for unemployment under very particular circumstances. So they did relax those circumstances somewhat. And then there was that was called PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, I believe. There was another one, and I want to say it was PUAI, but I can't remember the acronym. Anyway, this was an additional $600 per week to people who qualified for that pandemic-related unemployment. Okay. However, that $600 expired. Meanwhile, there were some eviction moratoria in effect, and I believe there was some rent relief in some places, but all of that kind of expired by July, and yet coronavirus is not over. Actually, to take a look on the screen right now, I mean, you could see in the last week or so that the curve is finally starting to go down, but basically the Democrats and Republicans let coronavirus relief expire right at the time that COVID was literally at its worst, way worse than March or April. That's the ruling class for you. They don't give a shit about us at all. And that includes Joe Biden. All this, he's better than Trump. No, both parties are letting us die on the vine here. That's what they're doing. So right now, like I said, it's September 8th, and we're about 6 weeks into the expiring of that extra $600 in benefits, that the PUA, the $200 a week thing, that is still in effect. But the Congress has gone on vacation, and I think is coming back right now today. But they basically just didn't have a deal and went on break anyway in the middle of a once-in-a-century pandemic. I mean, this is beyond contempt. But what I want to do in this video is basically I got some news articles and I took some screenshots, and I want to run you through a timeline of about a week before this whole thing expired, through the expiration, and then catching us up to the present. And I assume that we will have some news this week and next. I believe it's the Congress comes back today, or the House comes back today, and then the Senate comes back next week on the 14th. It's amazing. So here is an article. This is from July 20th by Zach Friedman, new stimulus package. Here's the key timeline. And actually this is from the 19th, excuse me. So what's the timeline for the new stimulus package? Here's what you want to know. Stimulus, key timeline. There's much anticipation about the new stimulus package, which could include several benefits for the American people and businesses, such as second stimulus checks. Comment, that's the $1,200 check, which a lot of other places did $2,000 checks. Unemployment benefits, payroll tax cut, return to work bonus, payment protection program, liability protection, funding for states and schools. Comment, that's another thing looming right now is the fallout from going back to school. We have so far had 2 waves. And by the way, for all the people who want to pedantically say, the first wave never ended, you don't have to go back down to 0 to have a second wave. We had a first wave which had a slight peak, a slight valley, but it was clearly the peak was behind us by 2 months. And then we had a second wave that was about double the size of the first one. The second wave is now in abatement, but probably when schools start going back in session, kids are going to spread it like crazy, and they're going to spread it to their parents, etc. And we're going to have a third wave. That would be my prediction. And the Trump administration has been all about sending people back to school, and I have not heard anything meaningful to the contrary from Democrats. It's like the system is completely unable to handle any stress. Capitalism is an outdated economic system. We need a new economic system. Capitalism cannot govern the world it has created. Capitalism opened the door to lots of interesting things from industry that were not being produced under feudalism, but it can no longer contain the world it has produced. We need socialism. We need working class control. That's the only way that we can govern industry properly, sustainably, etc., by running it not for profit, but for use in the public interest and democratically controlled. That is what we need. All right. And other economic priorities. When will the next stimulus happen? Here's the key timeline so you have full transparency about the legislative process. July 20, 2020. Congress returns from recess. They take recesses constantly, by the way, if you're not aware of that. Congress has not been in session since July 30th, 2020. So commenting, basically the enhanced pandemic benefits of $600 a week, those were set to expire at the end of July. What did they do? They took most of July off without a deal in place. And then those benefits expired. So we have, for the last 6 weeks, everybody has just not been receiving that money. They've been getting that $175 to $200, and that's it. And you're just expected to live on that. Now, we'll get up as we go on through these articles. We'll catch up with the president. But anyway, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected to introduce a new stimulus package this week in response to the HEROES Act, which is the $3 trillion stimulus package that the House Democrats passed earlier this year. McConnell's bill is expected to be around $1.3 trillion, less than half the size of the HEROES Act. Republicans and Democrats should start negotiations this week on the proposed stimulus package. Skipping to July 31st, the House of Representatives has scheduled in-person votes to end on July 31st. Then House members will be in summer recess. Pelosi has said that she is willing to forgo recess if a stimulus bill has not been finalized. And then the Senate is still in session after July 31st. So forward to August 7, which, of course, at the time of this article had not happened yet. The Senate is scheduled to start summer recess after August 7. McConnell has said that he expects Congress to finalize a stimulus bill before August 7th. If Congress does not reach an agreement by August 7th, this would mean there would be no second stimulus check in August. And, of course, there hasn't been. When will you get a second stimulus check? Well, Congress approved the CARES Act on March 27, 2020. The Treasury Department started sending the first stimulus check on April 15th. That's 17 days from approval to the first stimulus check being sent. So, 2.5 weeks, and then so you'd probably receive it 3 weeks later if you don't have direct deposit. For the second stimulus check, if Congress approves a second stimulus check, it's possible that second stimulus checks will be sent on a similar timeline. Based on the CARES Act precedent, this would imply that the second stimulus checks could be sent prior to September 1st. Of course, that didn't happen. Of course, the U.S. Treasury may take longer to send second stimulus checks, so there's no guarantee that the U.S. Treasury will adhere to the same schedule. Okay, and then they were predicting in September 8th, if Congress does not reach a stimulus deal in August, Of course, they didn't. Both the House and Senate are not in session until September 8th, which is today. Unless Congress works through the planned summer recess, they did not, any stimulus package would be delayed until September. While it's more likely that Congress finalizes a stimulus package by August 7, it's possible that Republicans and Democrats do not reach a consensus and a stimulus deal falls apart. Yes. Okay, October 9th. This is a prediction that, is still a month out. The House of Representatives is not in session in October. The Senate is in session through October 9. Given that the election is November 3rd, members typically return to their districts to campaign during October. Well, of course that's more important than people dying, being evicted, starving, etc. All members of the House and 35 senators are up for re-election. Given that it's an election year, members of both parties want to ensure that there's a new stimulus package to show to their constituents. Well, so far, I think they lose points for lateness, tardiness, not appreciated here. I kid, but this is deadly serious. So here's a second article. This is from July 31st, which is, of course, the expiration date of the 600 a week. Frustrations simmer as Congress prepares rare August work. Quote, I think partisanship and disagreement has locked down Washington. It's inexcusable, says one lawmaker of the stalled aid talks. Quote, we will not start the August district work period until we pass appropriate COVID-19 relief to meet the current health and economic crisis, said House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. Well, August has come and gone. We are now in September. There is no deal, and people are hurting. So this article, it quotes a lot of Democrats, and it mostly bemoans, the intrusion upon Congress's laziness. Quote, even the August recess, one of the Congress's most hallowed traditions. Fuck Congress, okay? Fuck you and your hallowed traditions. I just needed to say that. Has now been uprooted by the coronavirus pandemic. Well, you know what else is being uprooted? People from their fucking homes. That's what's being uprooted. People have been uprooted from their jobs. The kids have been uprooted from school. Now, I know that seems appealing at first, but it's disruptive. Moving on. So the Congress went back to work, but lawmakers often look forward to decamping from D.C. in August and returning to their districts, especially in the critical months before an election when retail politics can make or break an incumbent. But this year is devastatingly difficult. House leaders gave their members permission to leave Washington this weekend as long as they can return within 24 hours to vote on an eventual deal if one is ever reached. So in regard to what Hoyer said about not doing the August work until coronavirus is done, well, again, August came and went. Quote, Hoyer's announcement wasn't exactly a surprise, but a collective groan could almost be heard across the Capitol as his words reverberated through the House chamber. That means members will need to make yet another back-and-forth trek from their districts amid the raging global pandemic, with coronavirus cases still spiking in dozens of states and an estimated 1,000 Americans dying a day from COVID, which I think is the bigger issue here, not what Congress people do or don't want to do. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and White House negotiators have made little headway on a bipartisan coronavirus relief deal, despite meeting for several hours. Wow, several hours? Crazy. Where do they find the time? Over several days this week. Instead, leaders of both parties have continued their public posturing, pointing fingers at the other side for allowing critical federal unemployment benefits and a federal evictions moratorium to lapse, even as jobless claims tick up and experts worry about the economic cratering. Quote, we just don't have shared values. That's the way it is, Pelosi declared to reporters Friday. Well, fuck you. Fuck your fucking chocolate ice cream. Fuck your $100 million. Fuck you, Nancy Pelosi. Fuck you, Mitch McConnell. Fuck you, Donald Trump. Fuck you, everyone in the government. I don't care. You can't just keep pointing fingers while people get uprooted from their lives, while people lose hope for their future. It's a form of psychological torture, which is an argument I'm going to be making later in this video. continuing with the article, that all comes after a brutal year with the Senate impeachment trial of President Donald Trump in February that was over just weeks before Congress was forced to swiftly shutter the Capitol and draft massive legislation dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and the economic recession that followed. So Donald Trump is a complete piece of shit. Could have been impeached for emoluments violations in month one. Instead, the Democrats went with a complete loser of an impeachment campaign and then lost it. They fumbled the ball spectacularly, one might say on purpose, which just wound up strengthening Trump by making him look like a victim. I mean, of course, they still have their diehard Harry Potter liberal base, and I'm not a Trump supporter. Fuck Donald Trump. I can't believe he wound up becoming president. It's horrifyingly depressing that we're in this situation, but that's neoliberalism. That's what it will bring you, is proto-fascism into full fascism. But they're just standing there pointing fingers at each other. I don't think, when we will make no apologies. And, when we finally sort this whole situation out and have a change in the ruling class in the United States, from the capitalist class to the working class, and we get rid of all these people, they will no longer be in power. And they won't be able to just point fingers at each other. Oh, it's their fault. Oh, it's their fault. You let unemployment benefits lapse for 6 weeks during a once-in-a-century pandemic. You can't just explain that away with partisanship. You just can't. You simply can't. Our economic system doesn't work, and the political system attached to this economic system doesn't work. It doesn't work for the people. It works for the capitalists, not the workers. So the next article, this is from August 13th, skipping ahead on the timeline. So this is after the Congress went on recess. Posted August 13, 2020. The Senate has given up on its August legislative session without any agreement on a new COVID relief bill, as jet fumes leaving town in Senate parlance have overtaken any hope for a bipartisan deal. Quote, if the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader of the Senate decide to finally let another rescue package move forward for workers and for families, it would take bipartisan consent to meet for legislative business sooner than scheduled, Senate Majority Mitch McConnell said Thursday. McConnell is a piece of shit. All of these people are pieces of shit. No excuses. No excuses. They let people's money dry up for 6 weeks in a once-in-a-century pandemic. While no deal between the Trump administration and Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California and Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer, Chuck Schumer, is expected anytime soon, the formal move to perfunctory Senate sessions is just further evidence little is expected to happen. Under the agreement announced on the floor, the Senate is officially gone until 3 p.m. on Tuesday, September 8th, the day after Labor Day. So they don't care about us. These are, we've covered the parties who aren't in power in the last few days. We're covering the people who are in power. They don't care. They don't care. Skipping ahead, August 14th, lawmakers recess until September without COVID-19 stimulus deal. We have a picture of useless Nancy Pelosi up here trying to, looks like electioneer for the Dems with this graphic about comparing the Democrats and the Republicans' bill. We can't wait. The election's in November, but even if she's trying to do this to gin up support for, electoral support for Democrats in November, they don't take power till late January. We can't wait that long. That's 6 months away from this. We can't wait that long. But what would she know? She has $100 million. Quote, I want you to see how vast our differences are, Pelosi told reporters Thursday. It's no wonder we have a vast difference because this administration, other Republicans in Congress have never understood the gravity of this situation. She's just making this about Democrats versus Republicans. And, I don't have a quote to this effect in here, but my understanding was that the Republicans would go for $400 and the Democrats were holding out for $600. This is an absolute balls out emergency. Take the 400 for now. Getting absolutely nothing does nothing for anyone. People live paycheck to paycheck in this country. And we just had 6 weeks go by without them. And, you know, mortgages are anywhere from $1,000 for cheap ones, you know, to $1,500 to $2,000 and up. People can't live on $175 a week. Democrats have said they want the Republican proposals to increase COVID-19 spending from $1 trillion to $2 trillion and reintroduce a federal unemployment benefit that paid out-of-work Americans an extra $600 per week. That expired last month. The Republican proposal does reintroduce the enhanced federal benefit, but at reduced amounts. The Democratic plan calls for the same $600 payment per week. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow argued that $2 trillion is too much, and he said a Democratic effort to add funding for the U.S. Postal Service is part of a liberal left wish list. Trump has said he opposes new USPS funding, which critics say is an attempt by the president to stifle mail-in votes for the general election in November. All of that's true. Okay, Larry Kudlow's a piece of shit. Trump doesn't want an election. Absolutely. $2 trillion, he's wrong, is not too much. This is a complete emergency. But Democrats cannot just, I'm sorry, but people need money now. The USPS needs money now. They needed money before. They really need money now. This is in part because of the 2006 postal reform bill that the Republicans passed, trying to privatize the post office by requiring them to pre-fund employee benefits 20 years in advance, which makes them perpetually look like they are over budget. No private business has to go by those standards because lawmakers are not trying to privatize most of those other businesses and you know, bankrupt them to privatize. And that's the basic plan, is you sabotage the public service to make it look ineffective, and then you call for the more efficient, air quotes, free market to come in and take over that service for profit. Trump says, quote, "I've directed the Secretary of the Treasury to get ready and send direct payments, $3,400 for a family of 4, to all Americans," he said of the provisions in the GOP plan. Quote, "Democrats are holding this up." He said he's also ready to send rental assistance payments and more than $100 billion to states so they can reopen schools safely for the fall. There's no way to reopen schools safely. There is no way to do that. But this whole $3,400 thing sounds great until you realize that Trump is like, yes, I will give everyone $1 million provided that 100 purple unicorns are delivered to the White House. Like, he put all these conditions on it that make it unfulfillable. Basically, I don't know why they didn't quote it in this article, but I did read elsewhere that $3,400 was contingent on all of the states setting up a brand new computer infrastructure system to implement it, which is impossible. I mean, it would take half a year to get that up and running. So that's useless. It's an empty promise. It's a mirage, like everything with Trump. It's just an illusion. Okay, so we're getting near the end here. Here's an article from September 1st. Trump administration announces nationwide eviction moratorium through the end of the year. Now, that's actually some moderately good news. We are in an emergency. This does delay some of the worst effects for right now, because they know damn well people were depending on those enhanced unemployment benefits. And so they're doing something about it so that people don't just wind up by the tens of millions on the street, you know, this month. So quoting the article, relying on a public health law intended to prevent the spread of an illness, the Trump administration said Tuesday it is implementing a national 4-month moratorium on residential evictions. The moratorium, announced by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, was the latest measure by the administration to get a handle on the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, absent an agreement with Congress on a far more reaching package that would have the force of law. To stop evictions, health officials are relying on the 1944 Public Health Service Act, which gives the administration broad quarantine powers. The moratorium, which will run through December 31st, applies to individuals earning less than $99,000 a year and who are unable to make rent or housing payments. Quote, President Trump is committed to helping hardworking Americans stay in their homes and combating the spread of the coronavirus. White House spokesman Brian Morgenstern told reporters Tuesday, our first choice is to have bipartisan legislation that allocates specific rental assistance to the hardest people hit. So that's not what's happening. All they did was they just said that landlords cannot throw people out of their apartments. It doesn't mean rent's not due. It just means that landlords can't evict until January 1st. So without income, people are still, owing more and more rent month after month, as well as penalties and whatever else is going on. Like, their credit's still going to get destroyed. Plus, now they're just looking down the line from September 1st to January 1st. You got 4 months to just dread what's coming. Again, psychological torture. I would compare it to mock execution. Because people keep thinking that their lives are going to be destroyed. They're going to be evicted. They're going to end up homeless. Their kids are, going to be living in a hotel or in a tent. And then they extend the evictions 4 months. Okay, well, what happens in 4 months? There's no fucking plan. This system cannot deal with the situation. Underline that triple in red marker. This system cannot handle this situation. So what else happens? Well, all of the petty bourgeois who own the apartments, the rental complexes, whatever, they're also not getting paid. Many of these people, treat those properties as investments, as business ventures. And, a lot of them don't own those buildings outright yet. They're paying a financial capitalist back on a loan. They're paying a bank, a mortgage on that property. So there's no mortgage. There's no mortgage postponement for 4 months. So now you've got a situation where no one's getting paid because the unemployment benefits are expired. The landlords aren't getting paid and they can't evict, which good, they shouldn't be able to. We're in a global crisis, let alone that housing shouldn't be a commodity from a socialist perspective. But now you've got the petty bourgeois who are unable, if they don't have reserve capital, they are not going to be able to pay their mortgages. And in fact, I saw a story early in this whole coronavirus thing, it was probably back in like April, where Airbnb, which is a cancer on the whole rental market, has completely distorted the rental market and gone from, regular lease-based situations to these very, very precarious short-term rentals that a lot of times don't even line up with the first of the month. So they're fucking useless if you need an actual place to live, not just a crash pad. But of course, it's more flexible for capitalists, so they like it. Very libertarian. But Airbnb, a lot of these people were like robbing Peter to pay Paul. And when Airbnb fell, basically all these short-term rentals got banned by, the coronavirus restrictions and things having to be essential only, etc. They lost all of their couch surfers and they lost all of their vacation travel. And I saw a story about somebody who had been, contrary to the terms of Airbnb, had been subletting like 50 Airbnbs. And he was on the hook for like $50,000 and he had no tenants. He had no sublets and he was on the hook for like $50,000. So you're going to get a situation like that. So then what happens to those rental properties? They go into foreclosure. The bank owns them. What's going to happen? Some capital firm is going to buy them up. We already have a massive real estate crisis that's been building since the mid-2000s housing bubble and that whole situation in the 2008 crash, where people lost their houses in '08, '09, '10. Obama helped with that process. He helped banks take people's houses. And a lot of residential properties have been bought up by foreign capitalists who just have a lot of money. They want to get some American property, and they buy 3 or 4 houses. And then suddenly those houses are off the market. And then there's a housing crunch. The supply is short because it's not like tons of new houses are being built. They're just being bought. And it's a lot easier to buy a house than to, build one to replace it. And so we have a massive housing crunch. Housing prices are astronomical right now. I personally have been trying to move like forever. And it's been literally years. It's just not possible because the prices are so high. So it's, of course, the right-wing solution is we wait for the market correction and then prices will crash. It's just, there's massive, massive fallout from that and collateral of all the people who bought at the high prices because they needed somewhere to live. Suddenly their property's worth 50% of what it was or something like that. So anyway, with this eviction moratorium, they've set it up where now the landlords aren't getting paid. And again, don't misconstrue this as like sympathy for the landlords, but that the system is going to seize up again. That's my point. Okay. We need a different system where there aren't landlords. We could have housing co-ops. We could have a lot more public housing. We could have subsidized private housing, et cetera, on and on and on. But this is not going to work. You're setting it up for a massive seizure by January 1st if you don't add, some kind of payment to the system. Either you subsidize the landlords, which I would not be really in favor of that. But anyway, it's good that people aren't getting thrown out of their houses, but all they've done literally is kick the can down the road. And there's going to be effects in the meantime on the middleman, the landlord. So it's more economic chaos at a time when we already have massive economic chaos. So the last article here, stimulus checks, this is from September 4th. Stimulus checks, what to expect as Congress returns from recess. So they're coming back today. Quote, all eyes will be on the next coronavirus economic package and stimulus checks when the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives get back into session on September 8th and September 14th, respectively, after their summer recess. The passage of a second aid package has faced an impasse as Democrats and Republicans have been unable to agree on the size and the scope of the stimulus. Here's a quick overview of where the two parties stand presently and what to expect. So just commenting before we get into that, as I mentioned, there's not even an attempt at compromising. They're just telling the people to fuck off. That's basically what they're doing. I mean, it should not be that hard to find a compromise. They both agree that funding needs to happen. They're just refusing to agree on an amount. That's it. And I'll get more into this at the end, but, I started out happier this spring that, change is coming. People were out in the streets and stuff. We're now in a situation in September where, yes, there are protests still going, but the aid money has dried up. Literally, the government's just like, go back to work. Everything's normal, more or less. And you can't. So it's like, nothing's normal. What are you talking about? But that's the Democrats and Republicans who are, 99.999% of the government. Quote, where the two parties stand. Democrats have proposed a package that costs over $3 trillion, although they are now open to reducing the number by about $1 trillion. Democrats have pushed for direct payments of $1,200 per individual, with the total payments of as much as $6,000 per family. In comparison, the $1 trillion HEALS Act proposed by Republicans as a follow-up to the CARES Act passed in March also proposed up to $1,200 per individual, subject to annual income, with an additional $500 per dependent. However, in mid-August, Senate Republicans started circulating a new and significantly pared-down stimulus proposal, which makes no mention of the second round of direct stimulus payments. However, we think that a final package, if passed, it's not an option not to pass it, let me tell you. Right now, the country is distracted. It's summer. When things start cooling down again, the country's going to explode again because people, You just can't put people under this kind of pressure and expect not to have explosions. But I think that that's exactly what they expect. Or, channel it into the election. Yeah, fuck you. Okay. If passed, will include stimulus checks as they are seen as the most popular aspect of the economic packages, and they have a direct impact on low and middle income Americans. The stalemate on the second stimulus has been running for a few months now, and the president has been signing executive orders to address specific programs, such as the extension of enhanced unemployment benefits. I believe that's the wacko bullshit thing that he came up with that requires a new computer system. However, it's possible that a full package could be agreed upon and passed fairly quickly once Congress is back in session. With elections coming up this November, neither party may want to be seen as holding up the next stimulus. Moreover, the economic picture also remains quite tough. The U.S. unemployment rate stood at 10.2% in July 2020, triple up from 3.5 seen earlier this year. Also, more than 1 million Americans have been applying for unemployment benefits almost every week since the end of March. So, will we see benefits this week? I sure hope so, because the economy is they're on a knife's edge. They're really dancing with the devil on this. And they decided to give us Donald Trump, and just let the profits keep rolling. I mean, it's a casino economy. We're now in a form of capitalism that has so much speculation in the financial sector that that's just unregulated or barely regulated. They're just, they want to keep the casino open, which is on our backs as workers, on our backs. And this is what we get, is maybe we'll give you benefits, maybe we won't. Hit the streets. I mean, at this point, forget the representatives. I think they will listen more to the kinds of demos we saw in the first few weeks of George Floyd more than anything else. They do fear that. They do. Despite what the liberals want to tell you, they do fear that. They do fear the very wild, out of control protests. So, that's what works. Just telling you what works. So, but I wanted to hit a couple of other points here before we end the video. So, it occurred to me, as I mentioned, thinking about the eviction thing, it's like people are absolutely depending on those checks because they're prohibited by law or just science, common sense. They don't want to get COVID from working. And I think it's something like 60% of small businesses are projected not to reopen. I mean, half of small businesses fail in their first year or two. But with coronavirus, forget it. Forget it. I used to own a small business. I am sure glad I don't have one now. I mean, can you imagine? Or do you? Leave a comment. Do you have a shop? Do you have some kind of small business that has been impacted? Are you an independent contractor? Has your work been impacted by this? Leave a comment. Tell your story. If I get enough of these, I'll cover them all in a video. But as far as these checks, I know for myself, knowing that money was going out there, I felt pretty good in March. And I was like, oh, good. We finally get time. People get to stop working, go protest, and we're covered. Now, the government's just like, go back to work. And it's like, well, nothing's changed. Actually, COVID is twice as prevalent as it was before. Just go back to work. That's been pretty depressing. I got to say, I was very personally, I definitely hit a slump in August for sure. Just knowing that this apparent progress we seem to be making was coming to a complete halt. And they want to do it again. And I do think it's a form of torture, taking away people's livelihood, dangling this aid in front of them, letting it expire, letting people think that they're going to get evicted. So I pulled up this definition of psychological torture. There's an example here of mock execution. This is from a cheesy site called The Richest, but it works. So mock execution is when a victim is made to feel that their execution or the execution of a loved one will take place. It can involve various techniques like blindfolding the victim and holding a gun to their head, making them say their last words, forcing them to dig their own graves, or shooting blanks at them. Waterboarding is a form of mock execution as it involves simulated drowning. A different form of mock execution is called death row phenomenon. Prisoners on death row know that they will eventually die, and this can cause mental trauma. Inmates on death row can become suicidal and have delusions. Prisoners wait years on death row in tiny cells, which also brings into effect isolation torture. So I think the United States collectively, a lot of these uprisings were a rebellion against death row phenomenon. I mean, and speaking of also this, the isolation torture, COVID and the withdrawal of benefits, I think definitely is like a modified kind of mock execution. It's mock eviction, it's mock firing, although many people did get laid off and many aren't going back to work because their businesses aren't reopening. People are experiencing mental trauma because they feel like, you know, whether the economy, I know for me, it's like whether the economy crashes this month or not, I know it's going to happen again. And it's like, you know, I'm like, I hope I'm not the victim this time, you know, because you see people by the millions becoming statistics, victims of this system of capitalism. And it's like, is that going to be me? I think the United States collectively has death row phenomenon. And I don't mean to exclude other countries who are experiencing the same thing. I'm just trying not to speak for you. But please leave a comment if you're in another country and you feel that this applies to you. But death row phenomenon, isolation torture of having to stay in your house and just, you know, you don't know when you're going to be able to pay your bills again. So I had a little bit here extra about the psychology of torture, meaning the people who perpetrate it. So, you know, we as socialists are opposed to the system of capitalism. That said, it takes a special kind of asshole to work for capital. And particularly the higher up you get, the more likely you are to be a psychopath. And how do they do it? You know, how do they do it? I mean, it's important to understand how the system works, scientific socialism, and how and why we need to achieve socialism. But, you know, let's take a look at the class enemy here, what we're up against. So this is a quote, the perpetrator of torture. This is just from Wikipedia, by the way. Research during the last 60 years, starting with the Milgram experiment. That was Stanley Milgram, sociologist or social psychologist who did experiments getting people with not a prior history to hurt other people. Suggests that under the right circumstances and with the appropriate encouragement and setting, most people can be encouraged to actively torture others. John Conroy is quoted as saying, when torture takes place, people believe that they are on the moral high ground, that the nation is under threat, and that they are the front line protecting the nation, and people will be grateful for what they're doing. Stages of the perpetrator's torture mentality includes, please note that not all perpetrators go through all of these stages. 1, reluctance. The perpetrator is reluctant to participate or observe the administration of torture. 2, official encouragement. As the Stanford Prison Experiment and Milgram Experiment show, in an official setting, many people will follow the direction of an authority figure, such as a superior officer, particularly if it is presented as mandatory, even if they have personal uncertainty. The main motivations for this appear to be a fear of loss of status or respect, and the desire to be seen as a good citizen or good subordinate. Peer encouragement is the third. The perpetrator begins to accept torture as necessary, acceptable, or deserved, or to comply due to the need to conform to peer group beliefs. 4th, dehumanization. The perpetrator sees victims as objects of curiosity and experimentation rather than as human beings. The physical and psychological manipulations become just another opportunity to test the victim's response. 5, disinhibition. Sociocultural and situational pressures may cause perpetrators to undergo a lessening of moral inhibitions and, as a result, act in ways not normally accepted by law, custom, and conscience. 6, self-perpetuating. Within the organization, once torture becomes established as part of internally acceptable norms, under certain circumstances, its use often becomes institutionalized and self-perpetuating over time. What was once rarely used during extreme circumstances begins to be used more regularly with more reasons claimed to justify wider use. Example, one of the apparent ringleaders of the Abu Ghraib prison torture, that is the classic thing of the guy standing on the box with his arms out with electrodes connected to his hands with a hood on his head. Charles Grainer Jr., exemplified the stages of dehumanization and disinhibition when he was reported to have said, quote, "The Christian in me says it's wrong, but the corrections officer in me says, I love to make a grown man piss himself." And also, fuck cops, fuck corrections officers who are absolutely the worst. I keep pointing to the ProPublica article from last year that exposed there was a massive Facebook group of like 10,000 border customs and border agents and prison guards and everything who were just explicitly neo-Nazis and sharing all of this kind of pro-torture, dehumanizing stuff. If you're in that culture, get out of it. Just get out of it. Moving on to the psychological effects of torture. The effects of torture on the victim and the perpetrator are likely to be influenced by many factors. Therefore, it is unlikely that providing diagnostic categories of symptoms and behavior will be applicable across countries with very different personal, political, or religious beliefs and perspectives. There is always a question about applying diagnostic categories and descriptions of symptoms or behavior developed in Western societies to people from the developing countries with very different personal, political, or religious beliefs and perspectives. Victims. Torture has profound and long-lasting physical and psychological effects. Torture is a form of collective suffering that is not limited to the victim. The victim's family members and friends are often also affected due to adjustment problems such as outbreaks of anger and violence directed towards family members. According to research, psychological and physical torture have similar mental effects. Often torture victims suffer from elevated rates of the following: anxiety, depression, adjustment disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, disorders of extreme stress not otherwise specified, DSNOS, somatoform disorders, nightmares, intrusion, that would be intrusive thoughts that you can't get rid of while you're awake, insomnia, decreased libido, memory lapses, reduced capacity to learn, sexual dysfunction, social withdrawal, emotional flatness, and headaches. No diagnostic terminology encapsulates the deep distrust of others which many torture survivors have developed, nor the destruction of all that gave their lives meaning. Guilt and shame about humiliation during torture and about the survivor's inability to withstand it, as well as guilt at surviving, are common problems which discourage disclosure. Additional stress may be added due to uncertainty about the future, any possibility of being sent back to the country in which the survivor was tortured, and the potential lack of close confidants or social support systems. In addition, the presence of social isolation, poverty, unemployment, institutional accommodation, and pain can all predict higher levels of emotional distress in victims who survive torture. And what we're talking about here, of course, is psychological torture or mental torture. It's a type of torture that relies primarily on psychological effects and only secondarily on any physical harm inflicted. So there is a continuum between psychological torture and physical torture. They're often used in conjunction with one another and overlap in practice, with the fear and pain induced by physical torture often resulting in long-term psychological effects, and many forms of psychological torture involving some form of pain or coercion. The Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, commonly known as the United Nations Convention Against Torture, is an international human rights treaty under the review of the United Nations that aims to prevent torture, etc. And the convention gave for the first time in history a definition of psychological torture. It is: torture is any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing for an act he or a third person has committed or is suspected of having committed, or intimidating or coercing him or a third person for any reason based on discrimination of any kind, when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent or acquiescence of a public official or other person acting in official capacity. I'm going to make the case here and now that capitalism is torture, particularly the aggravated and we're entering into we have been in a protracted civil conflict for a long time in the United States, for decades now. I believe that we are on the verge of a civil war. I'm not happy about that, but I believe that what started 5 years ago as clashes between Antifa and groups like the Proud Boys in the streets would get bigger. They have gotten bigger. I predict they're eventually just going to continue until they don't stop. And at that point, arguably, the U.S. would just be in a civil war. I think that that's coming. I think that a lot of it versus more constructive organizing, and particularly I'm talking about all the right-wing chuds that get sucked into this, happens along lines that are very similar to what was described in that Psychology of Torture. Those people are put under strain. They're made to be in the torturer's roles in one way or another. Could just be harassment of people, leftists online or whatever. But I think that they get sucked into that. They think, better me than them. They become perpetrator on behalf of the system. And we get this conflict. And also, why is, they're infighting in the left? I think part of the reason is we're under so much fucking stress. We're also angry. I mean, there are valid disputes. I'm not saying that, there aren't differences between, say, Trotskyists and the rest of Marxists. I'm not saying that there aren't differences between anarchists and Marxists. But I think that when we're able to organize constructively, people are happier. And I think conversely, when people are happier, they have more capacity to organize constructively, have tolerance, not have outbursts of people. I mean, all of the things that I was just reading on the list of victims of torture, victims of oppression, the anxiety, the depression. I mean, I hear this constantly from other people on the left of how badly their mental health has been impacted by awareness and attempts to fight back against the system and the ways that the system has come down on them. That certainly has happened to me in my life. So I think one explanation of, why is it so hard to organize people for socialism? I think that the long-lasting psychological effects of living in this system can just reduce people to a state of fear, whether they'll admit it or not, and they wind up siding with the oppressor in along lines that are described in this article. It's horrible. Yeah, I mean, some of it is they think that they're going to get rich and this and that, but I'm talking about the working class people. We need to get out there, agitate, educate, and organize. But anyway, this is intended to conclude my little trilogy of left-wing third parties that I did in the first video, right-wing third parties like the Libertarians and Constitution, which I covered in yesterday's video, and then the current, ruling class parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and what they're doing. And again, I think that what they're doing is obviously grossly mismanaging an outdated and failing economic system. But I think also what they're doing amounts to torture. So we need a revolution. We need a change in the ruling class, the capitalist class to the working class. I don't think we're going to torture ourselves in the same way. And we really need to start this process right now. So this has been Socialism for All. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. We're now up to 7 patrons, and we got our first $10 patron. So thank you very much to all of you for your contributions. Every contribution is very encouraging to me, honestly. Speaking of psychological, influences and motivations, I love seeing a new patron, even if it is for $2. So thank you. Of course, the more actual money I get, the more time I can spend on this comfortably. I'm not independently wealthy. So, the more you can give, the better. You can also like, share, and subscribe this video on YouTube. Click the notification bell as well. And follow us at facebook.com/Socialism for All. Please take this video, take Socialism for All's link, and share it in your Discord groups, in your Facebook groups, wherever you are on the internet. Spread it in your Reddit sub-forums and go forth and fruitful and multiply and all that kind of stuff.